The British people do want to cap the number of people coming here. That's the fundamental issue, and none of the options that I heard you describe just then really seem to address this reality.
Let's talk about migration. It is, of course, featuring in the news after more than 150 people have been rescued from a burning migrant dinghy in the Channel. We got an updated figure, actually, from David Chazan, who is the Times correspondent in France, who's been along the French shoreline in the past couple of days. 173 is the new figure that were on that boat. Both British and French vessels worked together on the rescue. The boat was attempting to cross to the UK when its engine caught fire, according to the French Maritime Prefecture of the Channel and North Sea. This comes after Andy Burnham gave this speech on immigration from Dover.
We're just going to be relentless. People want to see this issue addressed. I heard that on the doorsteps in Makerfield. But we also need to build a system that offers safe routes for people as well, because that also takes away the selling point of the gangs. So on every level, we've got to come at this, but crucially, increasing the enforcement activity.
Andy Burnham there speaking at the weekend. He's off on his hollybobs now. We don't know where.
No,
Can you guess?
No, well... God, no. I mean, I wouldn't. I'd hate to guess.
Someone's bound to find
I
Burnham.
think they deserve their privacy, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's bring in Amreen Qureshi, who is a research fellow at the IPPR. Hello to you, Amreen.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Real pleasure. The majority of people on board this vessel, we now know 173 people aboard, which is an incredibly packed super dinghy, as it's called. The majority of people on board refused French assistance. What can we take from that? Just explain why that would be.
Well, I think it's also important to acknowledge that it's a relief that actually the 173 people that were on that dinghy, there were no casualties. So I think it's important that we acknowledge that.
Correct.
I think on the point of why they might have refused French help is probably because they were trying to enter UK shores. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that that obviously small boat crossings are a continual problem regardless of who comes into power. And the key question really is about how to reduce these crossings. And from the research that we've done at IPPR, it's a complex problem and there really isn't a silver bullet solution. So I think what the current government really needs to focus on is making sure that we've got stronger cooperation with the French authorities, but also on top of that, making sure that we're offering safe and accessible routes for people that do want to claim asylum in the UK.
Are we not cooperating with French authorities anyway? We're certainly giving them quite a bit of money each year to try and stop boats launching. That is, you're completely right, where they're most useful. Once a boat enters the sea, particularly if there are more than 20 people aboard, it becomes very difficult for the French to do anything. But I mean, I thought we already had this down.
Yeah, so we are definitely cooperating with the French authorities, but
are they cooperating with us?
Well, I think it's about really trying to understand like that. You know, it isn't just one solution. So it's all well and good that we are cooperating with the French authorities, but we can't solely rely on deterrence tactics as well. Which is something that we have been focusing on a lot, increased enforcement. Alongside the enforcement, we also need to make sure that we're putting in place safe and accessible routes, because that would actually undercut the business of people smuggling. And then on top of that, also, we need to make sure that we have a well-run asylum system that's good for refugees, but also good for taxpayers and good for public confidence as well. So if all of these three solutions are working in tandem, then actually we would have a better chance of reducing the small boat crossings.
You haven't mentioned, I notice, deportation or anything like that, but on the question of safe and legal routes, is this not misdiagnosing the problem? Because the issue is not, if you wanted to just stop the small boat crossings, we could do that tomorrow. We could just stop searching the lorries, right? And then people would take the safer route under the lorries and the trains instead of getting in the boats, right? They get the boats because we've cracked down on other means. The policy problem at the heart of this is that existing refugee law gives no state the ability to cap the number of legitimate refugees it takes, which means that states seek other means to restrict access of applicants. So within existing refugee law, if we created safe and legal routes, there would be no way to cap the numbers of people coming here. The British people do want to cap the number of people coming here. That's the fundamental issue, and none of the options that I heard you describe just then really seem to address this reality.
Well, I think it's important that we don't take safe and accessible routes off the table of the discussion. And yeah, I think there is definitely another question to be answered around caps and actually how these safe and accessible routes are designed. But it's not something that we should completely take off the table when it comes to a solution to reducing small boat crossings. We can't just focus on enforcement or strengthening the borders. Ultimately, we do know that the small boat crossings, it's an international challenge. Criminal smuggling gangs don't operate within national borders, so governments can't either. So we need as much closer cooperation with France and our European partners to disrupt those networks. But then also, like, the safe and accessible routes would effectively, it's if the only route available is via a smuggler, then the smuggler will always have customers. So I think it's really important that we do offer an alternative to make sure that we can undercut the business of people smuggling.
When Andy Burnham was talking at in Dover at the weekend, he didn't really once mention safe and legal routes, not in the transcript that I saw anyway. He talked about how he had heard and understood the issue of migration, illegal migration, on the doorsteps of Makerfield. He said he understood it was a really important issue for people. He didn't talk about providing safe and legal routes. He talked about trying to stop and trying to find a way of so many people entering the UK. He understood that the wider context is the number of people coming here and the issue that creates, the disillusion that it causes the British voter. I mean, Burnham at his core should be all up for safe and legal routes. That is something traditionally Labour have always supported. What do you think of this about turn, of this deflection away from that by Andy Burnham?
Well, I think it's really important that, like, the new government does focus on multiple solutions. As I said, the small boat crossings has been a long-standing issue. It's a complex issue, and there isn't a silver bullet solution. And safe and legal routes and accessible routes does have to be part of that solution. But alongside that,
but it obviously isn't for our Prime Minister, and he's leading the way on this. Doesn't that concern you?
So at IPPR, we would say that we need to make sure that safe and legal routes remains as part of the discussion, and it can't just be safe and legal routes. As I said, we also need to make sure that we're having more productive conversations with not only our French neighbours but also our wider European neighbours. And also, I think the safe and accessible routes has to be part of the broader reforms that we need to make within our immigration system. So essentially fixing our asylum system, because we need to have a well-run asylum system to make sure that there's faster and also higher quality decision making, but also making sure that those that don't have the right to remain can be returned more quickly too.
So in terms of a better run asylum system, do you have any details about what you think that would involve? Because the problem with that sort of sentence is that everyone can agree with that they want a better run asylum system, but for some people that means allowing asylum seekers to work, giving them access to public funds so that they integrate more quickly. For other people that means a proper purpose-built asylum detention estate, more effective deportations, more rigorous deportation regime. And both of those people would say that they want a more effective asylum system. So at IPPR, which one of those do you mean?
So when we're talking about an effective asylum system, it means several things essentially, but we know that the backlog has been a massive issue within our asylum system. We know that lots of people have been stuck in limbo, have been stuck in hotels for months, sometimes years at a time, trying to wait for a decision. So one thing that we have constantly advocated for is making sure that there is better quality decision making, but also faster decision making to bring the backlog down. Now, the backlog has come down over the past couple of years, so that is a positive move forward. But then on top of that, it's also important that we look at how we're treating people that are seeking asylum within the UK. And, I don't think anyone thinks that the current reliance on asylum hotels is a very good outcome. They're incredibly expensive, and they're a symptom of a system that has become clogged up. So people staying in temporary accommodation for much longer than intended because of delays, and a shortage of a dispersal accommodation is also not a good idea. So one of the quickest ways to reduce the cost is to make fast asylum decisions and reduce reliance on hotels, but also making sure that the decision making is actually good in the first place, because if the decision making isn't good or effective, then the appeals backlog then clogs up the system.
Look,
so there's lots of bottlenecks across the system that need to be worked on.
We are going to have to leave it there for time, unfortunately. Amreen Qureshi, thank you, is a research fellow at the IPPR, the Institute for Public Policy.